Before you close your eyes tonight, let me tell you a gentle story about a place that has been waiting for you. A place where time moves differently, where the weight of wakefulness lifts like fog from a quiet garden. You don't need to do anything right now except breathe and listen. Let yourself sink deeper into wherever you are, because this story is meant only for you. There was a woman named Eleanor who had forgotten what sleep felt like. Not forgotten exactly, more like sleep had become a stranger who no longer came to visit. Night after night, she would lie in the darkness, her mind spinning with all the things she couldn't control, all the moments from the day replaying like a song stuck on repeat. 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. The hours stretched like taffy, and she felt herself becoming thinner, more distant from the life happening around her. But one evening, as she sat by her window watching the rain, something changed. She noticed a shimmer in the air, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, except this was winter, and the day was cool. When she looked closer, she saw it was the corner of a doorway, soft and luminous, tucked between the bookshelf and the window frame. It hadn't been there before. She knew her own home, knew every corner, every shadow, and this was new. Eleanor's heart moved gently. She wasn't frightened. Something in that shimmer felt like home, like coming back to a place she'd always known but somehow forgotten. She stood slowly, as one does in a dream, and reached toward the soft light. Her fingers touched something warm and smooth, like velvet that had been left in the sun. The door opened without a sound. Beyond it was a library, but not one she'd ever seen. The shelves seemed to stretch endlessly upward, disappearing into a ceiling that looked like twilight, that peaceful time when day surrenders to night and the world holds its breath. Candles floated in the air at various heights, their flames steady and warm, casting a glow that was neither bright nor dim, but perfectly, impossibly comfortable. The air smelled like old paper and something else, something that made her shoulders release a tension she didn't know she was holding. A woman sat in an armchair by a circular window. She looked up and smiled. She had silver hair and eyes the color of starlight, and there was something ancient in her face, something that had been patient for a very long time. "I've been waiting for you," the woman said, and her voice was like wind chimes heard from far away. "My name is Vera, and this is the Sanctuary of Gentle Hours. You've come because you need to remember something very important. You need to remember what rest feels like." Eleanor found herself walking forward, drawn like a boat following a current she couldn't see but completely trusted. Eleanor sat in the chair across from Vera, without remembering that she had decided to sit. The chair wrapped around her like the embrace of someone who had loved her since before she was born. She felt something inside her begin to relax, a tightness she'd carried in her chest for so long that she'd stopped noticing it was there. "How did I find this place?" Eleanor asked, and even her voice sounded different here, calmer, as though the sanctuary itself was teaching her how to speak gently. Vera poured tea from a pot that had appeared on the small table between them. The liquid was the color of honey, and steam rose from it in spirals that looked almost like they were dancing. "Places like this aren't found," Vera said. "They're remembered. You see, before there was worry and time and all the things that keep you awake, You knew about rest. You knew it the way flowers know about the sun. But somewhere along the way, you forgot. You started believing that rest was something you had to earn, something that would come only after everything was finished. And there's always something unfinished, isn't there? Eleanor nodded. This was true. This was so true that tears came to her eyes. In this sanctuary, Vera continued, there are 7 gentle revelations. Each one is waiting in a different room, behind a different door. Each one will teach you something your body already knows, but your mind has forgotten. And as you learn, your sleep will return to you, not because you're chasing it, but because you'll stop running from rest. What are these revelations? Eleanor asked. The tea was warm in her hands now, and she took a small sip. It tasted like comfort itself, like the essence of every safe moment she'd ever known. The first is just beyond that doorway, Vera said, pointing to a door made of pale wood, so soft it looked almost like it was made of moonlight. It's a room where time doesn't move the way it usually does. In there, you'll meet someone who's been waiting for you. They'll show you the first truth about rest. Eleanor set down her teacup. She could feel her heart beating slowly, steadily, like a drum played by someone who knew that beauty lives in silence between the notes. Will I be afraid? She asked. No, Vera said. You're safe here. Everything in this sanctuary exists to help you remember, that's all. Eleanor stood, and as she did, she noticed that the heaviness in her limbs had become something different. It felt like peace now, like the weight of being held, rather than the weight of carrying everything alone. The door opened before Eleanor touched it, as though it had been waiting for her approach. Inside was a garden unlike any she had ever seen, even in dreams. The grass was impossibly soft, almost glowing with its own gentle light. Flowers bloomed in slow motion, their petals unfolding like hands opening to receive a gift. But what struck Eleanor most was the quality of the light. It was the light of neither day nor night, but something in between, a perpetual golden hour that existed nowhere in the ordinary world. A man sat on a bench beside a small stream. His hair was white, but his face held a kind of timelessness, as though age had only made him more peaceful. When he looked up at Eleanor, she felt recognized in a way she never had before, as though he could see not just who she was now, but who she had been as a child, before the world taught her to hurry. "Sit with me," he said. His voice was like pages turning in an old book, each word careful and perfect. "My name is Thomas, and I've been the keeper of this first room for a very long time. Do you know what you're about to learn?" Eleanor shook her head and sat beside him on the bench. It seemed to have been designed specifically for her body, for the precise configuration of her spine and her shoulders and the particular way she needed to be held. "You're about to learn that rest is not something you earn," Thomas said. "You've been living as though rest is a reward, as though you must first accomplish, first achieve, first prove yourself worthy of being allowed to stop. But that's an illusion. It's a story someone told you, and you believed it so completely that you forgot it was just a story." Thomas picked up a smooth stone from the edge of the stream and held it out to Eleanor. She took it. It was warm. "This stone didn't work to deserve being here," Thomas continued. "It didn't accomplish anything to earn the right to rest in this stream. It simply exists, and by existing, it is allowed to be part of the world. The water flows around it.
The sun warms it. Other stones rest beside it. None of this is earned. It simply is. Eleanor looked at the stone in her hand. It was so simple, so obvious, and yet something in her chest began to open, like a fist unclenching after years of being squeezed. Rest is your birthright, Thomas said. Not something to be earned, but something that belongs to you simply because you're alive. Your body knows this. Your bones remember. Even when your mind forgot, your deepest self kept waiting for you to come back to this truth.
Eleanor clutched the stone to her chest and felt something shift inside her. It wasn't a big shift, not dramatic or explosive, but it was real. It was like a lock opening inside her body, releasing a room she'd sealed shut a long time ago. "Thank you," she whispered. Thomas smiled. "You don't need to thank me. I've only reminded you of what you already knew. Come, there's another door waiting for you. The second revelation is through there." Eleanor stood and turned to see another doorway, this one carved from wood the color of dusk. She walked toward it, and Thomas's voice called after her. "Keep the stone," he said. "You'll need it." When Eleanor passed through the second doorway, she found herself in a room filled with mirrors. But these weren't ordinary mirrors. Each one showed not a reflection of her body, but a reflection of a moment in her life. She saw herself as a child, playing in a sandbox with complete absorption, that deep focus before worry existed. She saw herself as a teenager, laughing with her best friend on a summer evening. She saw herself at various ages, moments when she had felt peace, when she had felt held by life itself. A woman emerged from between the mirrors. She had Eleanor's face, but softer somehow, younger, yet also older and wiser at the same time. Eleanor realized with a gentle start that she was looking at a version of herself she thought she'd lost. "I'm the part of you that remembers how to rest," the woman said. Her voice was Eleanor's voice, but kinder to itself. "I've been here all along. Even when you forgot, even when you stopped listening, I was here, sleeping in the parts of you that you pushed aside. Every night when you lay awake, I was dreaming for both of us. I never stopped knowing how to sleep. I just waited for you to let me come back." Eleanor reached out and touched the mirror, and her hand passed through it as though it were made of moonlight and memory. She stepped through and embraced herself, and as she did, she felt something ancient and precious return to her body. It was like coming home to a house she'd lived in her whole life, but had locked all the doors to. "Your body remembers every time it's rested," the woman who was Eleanor said, "and tonight it will rest again. The worry you carry isn't heavier than you. You're strong enough to set it down." When Eleanor stepped back through the dusk-colored doorway, she found herself in the main library again, but everything looked different now. The shadows seemed softer. The light appeared warmer. She was beginning to understand that this sanctuary changed as she changed, that the place itself was somehow responsive to her transformation. Vera was waiting by a window, and beside her stood a small table with fresh tea and warm bread that smelled of honey and almonds. "You're beginning to remember," Vera said. "I can see it in the way you're breathing. Can you feel how your shoulders have dropped? Your whole body is learning something it thought it had forgotten. Eleanor did notice. She felt lighter, not as though a weight had been removed, but as though she'd realized the weight she was carrying was never hers to hold in the first place. The third revelation waits through the blue door, Vera said, gesturing to a doorway that seemed to be made of twilight itself. This one is about the nature of worry. It's about understanding that the things keeping you awake are often not what they seem. Eleanor ate a piece of the warm bread, and it tasted like peace and nourishment and something she couldn't name, but her body understood immediately. She felt her energy returning, but it was different from the frantic energy of daytime. This was a calm energy, a steady presence that seemed to come from her center. What happens when I've learned all the revelations? Eleanor asked. Then you'll wake, Vera said simply. But you'll be different. You'll carry the remembering with you. The sanctuary doesn't need to be a place you return to in the physical world. It becomes a place inside you, always accessible, always waiting to remind you of what you learned here. Eleanor stood and walked toward the blue door. As she approached it, she became aware of a sound she hadn't noticed before. It was the sound of the building itself, a kind of gentle humming, as though the sanctuary was singing to her, welcoming her deeper into its mysteries. The door opened, and Eleanor stepped into a room made entirely of clouds, or rather, the walls were made of a soft, cloudy substance that was neither solid nor completely insubstantial. Walking on them felt like walking on calm water, and Eleanor's footsteps made no sound. A figure sat in the center of the room, and as Eleanor approached, she realized it was a very old woman, so ancient that she seemed almost like a memory given shape.
I am grandmother, the ancient woman said, and her voice sounded like wind through canyon rocks, ancient and patient and full of knowing. I've been waiting for you in this room of clouds because what I have to teach you can only be understood here, in a place where nothing is solid, where everything shifts and changes. Eleanor sat before her, cross-legged on the soft, cloud-like floor. You lie awake at night, grandmother continued, because you believe your worries are real. But look around you. Everything here is made of the same substance as your worries. They seem solid, don't they? But they're not. They're clouds, and clouds are neither here nor there. They drift and shift and change shape constantly, yet you hold them as though they're mountains. Eleanor looked around the room, and she began to notice something extraordinary. The walls, which appeared solid, were actually shifting slightly. Patterns moved through them like thoughts moving through mind. In one moment, she could see a shape that looked like a bird, but when she looked again, it had become a tree, and then a river, and then something she had no name for. Your mind does this too, grandmother said. You take a small concern, and in the darkness of night you give it shape. You add more and more to it, layering your thoughts upon it until it seems to tower over you. But it's still just cloud, still just the substance of unquiet mind. Grandmother reached into the space beside her and pulled forth something luminous. It was a small cloud, and inside it, Eleanor could see images of her own worries.
She could see the stack of bills she'd worried about. She could see the conversation with her sister that had troubled her. She could see the feeling that she was falling behind, never quite doing enough. "These are your clouds," Grandmother said. "Watch what happens when you stop giving them energy." And as Eleanor watched, the cloud began to drift upward, spreading and dissipating. The images inside it grew fainter and fainter until they were nothing but wisps of white against white. "This is what happens when you stop feeding your worries with attention," Grandmother said. "They don't disappear, but they transform. They become less solid, less real, and in that space, sleep can return. Your body is designed to rest. Rest is its natural state. When you stop resisting it with the energy of worry, it comes naturally, like water finding its level." Eleanor sat with Grandmother for what felt like both a moment and an eternity. Time in the sanctuary didn't move the way it did outside. Each second seemed to contain more space inside it, more room for understanding and transformation. "There's something I want you to practice," Grandmother said. "When a worry comes to you in the night, I want you to see it as what it is, a cloud, just a cloud. Don't fight it, don't push it away, because that only makes it denser. Instead, watch it. Let it drift through your mind like weather passing through the sky. You don't argue with clouds. You don't try to force them to leave. You simply observe as they move, as they transform, as they eventually dissipate." Eleanor nodded. She understood in a way that went deeper than words. "As you do this," Grandmother continued, "you'll notice that the night becomes less frightening. It becomes a space where your body can finally do what it was meant to do. Rest is not something that happens only when everything is solved. Rest happens when you stop waiting for everything to be solved. There will always be something to worry about. This is the nature of being alive. But this doesn't mean you can't sleep." Eleanor felt tears on her cheeks. She wasn't sad, but moved by the simple truth of what she was learning. "How do I thank you?" she asked. "You thank me by sleeping," Grandmother said. "You thank me by lying down tonight and trusting that your body knows what to do. You thank me by remembering that the night is not your enemy. It's your friend come to restore you. It's the dark that holds the stars. It's the silence that holds the music of your own heartbeat." Eleanor stood to leave, and Grandmother reached out and touched her forehead. Where her finger touched, Eleanor felt warmth, and the warmth began to spread through her entire body. "The next door is the green one," Grandmother said. "In there you'll learn about the power of your own breath. Your breath has been keeping you alive all this time, but you've forgotten to pay attention to it. When you remember your breath, you'll remember that you are supported, moment by moment, by the rhythm of life itself." Eleanor walked toward the green door with a lightness in her step she hadn't felt in years. It was as though worry had been a burden she was finally setting down, a weight she realized she never needed to carry at all. The green door opened onto a garden of breath. This was Eleanor's first thought, and she knew immediately it was true.
Everything in this garden moved with the rhythm of breath. Trees swayed like inhales and exhales. Flowers opened and closed in the same gentle pattern. The grass rippled like the rising and falling of a belly at rest. Even the light seemed to breathe, pulsing gently like a living thing. A woman stood in the center of the garden. She wore clothes the color of emerald, and her hair moved like water, even though there was no wind. "I'm Iris," she said. "I teach the breath. Do you know what your breath has been trying to tell you all these years while you lay awake?" Eleanor shook her head. "Your breath has been saying you are safe. You are alive. You are supported by something much larger than your worries. Every breath you take is proof that the universe is sustaining you, moment by moment, without any effort on your part. You don't have to force your heart to beat. You don't have to remember to breathe. Your body knows how. But in the day, with all the rushing and worrying, you've learned to breathe shallowly, holding tension in your chest. At night, when your mind finally quiets, your body tries to return to deeper breathing, but your mind wakes it up, gives it more to worry about, and the cycle continues. Iris walked over to Eleanor and placed her hand on her chest. "Feel what your heart is doing right now," Iris said. "It's beating steadily, calmly. It has never skipped a beat. It has never needed you to tell it what to do. This is the miracle you live inside every single day." Eleanor placed her hand over Iris's and felt the gentle rhythm beneath. It was true. Her heart had been beating steadily the whole time, whether she was awake or asleep, whether she was worrying or not. "Tonight, when you lie in bed," Iris said, "I want you to do something simple. Count your breaths. 1 on the inhale, 2 on the exhale, and keep going until you reach 10, then start again. Don't try to make it perfect. Just be aware of the breath, the rhythm, the ancient pattern that connects you to every living thing. As you do this, your mind will slow. Your body will recognize the rhythm of rest." Iris taught Eleanor a specific breathing pattern, one that was designed to calm the nervous system. She showed her how to breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, and exhale for a count of 6. The longer exhale, Iris explained, activated the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of the body that knew how to rest.
As Eleanor practiced the breathing pattern with Iris, she felt something shift inside her chest. It was like a lock that had been held tight for years, suddenly releasing. She could feel her shoulders drop even further. Her belly, which had been held in tension, began to expand and soften. Her mind, which had been constantly reaching forward into worry, began to settle into the present moment, into the simple reality of breath moving in and out. "That's it," Iris whispered. "That's perfect. Feel how your body responds to this rhythm. This is not something new you're learning. This is something you're remembering. Your body knew this rhythm before your mind learned to worry." Eleanor and Iris stood together in the breathing garden, and Eleanor could feel her heartbeat slowing, becoming even more steady and calm. The garden around them seemed to respond too, the movement of the plants synchronizing with her breathing. It was as though the entire space was breathing with her, and she was breathing with it. There was no separation. "One more thing," Iris said. "When you're lying in bed at night and you feel the worry starting again, I want you to place your hand on your heart. Feel it beating. It will remind you that you're alive, that you're safe, that the universe has been supporting you all along. Your body is not your enemy. Your breath is not your enemy. They're both trying to help you remember." Eleanor felt gratitude pour through her like warm honey. She understood now that she had made an enemy of her own body, resisting sleep as though sleep was something that had betrayed her. But sleep hadn't betrayed her. She had betrayed sleep by demanding it perform, by requiring it to come only after everything was done. "The next door," Iris said, pointing toward a doorway made of soft silver light, "leads to a room of rest itself. This is where you'll learn the most important revelation. This is where everything will come together." Eleanor walked toward the silver door, and with each step she felt her body becoming heavier, more grounded, more ready to surrender. The sanctuary was doing its work. Her mind was beginning to quiet. Her body was beginning to remember. The silver door felt like touching starlight, and as it opened, Eleanor stepped into a room that seemed to be made entirely of comfort itself. It was neither warm nor cool, but at the perfect temperature. It was neither bright nor dark, but filled with exactly the right amount of light. It was exactly, precisely, perfectly comfortable. In the center of the room made of comfort was a bed. It was not a simple bed, but the most extraordinary bed Eleanor had ever seen. It seemed to be made of clouds, and yet it was solid beneath her as she sat on the edge. The sheets felt like they were woven from moonlight. The pillows seemed to mold themselves perfectly to her body. This was not a bed designed for human bodies. This was a bed designed specifically for Eleanor's body, for the particular shape of her spine and the particular way she needed to be held. A figure emerged from the far corner of the room. Eleanor could not quite see them clearly, but they felt familiar in a way that made her heart ache. As they came closer, Eleanor realized that it was herself, but a version of herself who had slept well, who had rested deeply, who carried no tension in her shoulders. It was herself as she would become. "I am you from tomorrow morning," the figure said. "I've come to show you what it feels like to have rested. Can you feel the difference? My mind is clear. My body feels restored. My face has softened. And this all came from one thing. You let yourself sleep." Eleanor looked at this version of herself and saw that it was true. The difference was remarkable. This Eleanor had peace written on her face. "But it starts now," her future self said. "It starts tonight, in this very moment, by lying down on this bed and trusting that your body will do what it knows how to do. You don't have to earn this. You don't have to prove yourself worthy. You just have to lie down and let go." Eleanor stood and moved toward the extraordinary bed. Every step felt like she was moving through honey, through golden light, through pure comfort. When she reached the bed, she lay down, and immediately she felt her body recognize what it had been waiting for. This was what she needed. This was what she had been missing. "Now close your eyes," her future self said.
Now let your breath find its rhythm. Now let your body do what it was meant to do. Sleep is coming for you. You don't need to chase it. You just need to let it catch you. Eleanor closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw stars.
In the sanctuary, time had become something entirely different. Eleanor was not sure if she had been lying on the extraordinary bed for 5 minutes or 5 hours. It didn't matter. Time had become like the clouds in grandmother's room, insubstantial, always shifting. What mattered was what was happening inside her. Her body was releasing everything it had been holding. Layer by layer, Eleanor could feel the tension leaving her shoulders, her neck, her jaw, her belly. As each layer released, it was replaced by something else, something that felt like peace, like the weight of being held by something infinitely patient and kind. Her mind, which had been like a computer with too many browser windows open, was beginning to close those windows. The worries about bills, about work, about whether she was doing enough, about whether she was loved, about whether she was failing somehow at the essential task of being alive. All of these began to fade like stars at dawn. But instead of the harsh, alert awakeness that dawn usually brought, what Eleanor felt was a deepening peace, a gathering softness. She was not sinking downward, she was expanding outward. Her boundaries were becoming less fixed. She could no longer clearly distinguish between herself and the bed, between herself and the room, between herself and the sanctuary itself. Vera appeared beside the extraordinary bed. How she had gotten there, Eleanor didn't know or care. It didn't matter. Nothing outside the present moment mattered anymore. "You're almost there," Vera said. "Can you feel it? The rest is almost within reach. But there's one more thing I want you to understand before you slip fully into sleep." Eleanor opened her eyes, though it took a long time to remember how. She looked at Vera. "Rest is not the absence of life," Vera said softly. "Rest is where life renews itself. It's where all your healing happens. When you sleep, your body isn't empty or inactive. It's more active than you can imagine. It's rebuilding cells. It's processing emotions. It's downloading memories, filing them away, making room for new experiences. Sleep is the most profound activity of your being." Vera placed her hand on Eleanor's forehead, and where she touched, Eleanor felt a gentle warmth. "There's no time limit on healing," Vera continued. "Some nights you'll sleep deeply and wake restored. Some nights you'll sleep lightly, and some nights you might still struggle. But now you understand something crucial. The struggle itself is part of the healing. It's not a sign of failure. It's just your body and mind learning a new way of being." Eleanor lay on the extraordinary bed in the sanctuary, and she became aware of a truth that seemed to include all the other truths she had learned. The sanctuary was not separate from her bed at home. The moment of peace she was experiencing here was not separate from the moments of peace she would experience in her own bedroom. The only difference was how deeply she believed that peace was possible. For so long, she had told herself a story about her bedroom. It was the place where Insomnia lived. It was the place where her mind went to race and spin and worry. She had made her bedroom the enemy, the place where bad things happened, the place where sleep betrayed her. But now, lying in this extraordinary bed, Eleanor understood something. The peace she felt here was available to her everywhere. It was not dependent on a magical sanctuary. It was dependent on her willingness to believe that she deserved to rest. It was dependent on her willingness to stop fighting against her own body, against the night, against the simple human need for sleep. When you wake, Vera said, you won't remember this place in the way you remember ordinary rooms, but you'll carry the feeling of it with you. Your body will remember, your deeper mind will remember, and that remembering will change everything. Eleanor wanted to protest, wanted to ask if she could stay here forever in this comfortable place where everything was soft and safe and perfect. But she understood that this wasn't how the healing worked. The healing was not in staying in the sanctuary. The healing was in carrying the sanctuary back into ordinary life. The healing was in knowing with absolute certainty that she deserved to rest and that her body knew how to receive that gift. "I'm ready," Eleanor said, and she was surprised by the strength in her voice. Vera smiled. "I know you are. But before you go, I want you to take something with you." Vera handed Eleanor a small stone, similar to the one that Thomas had given her, but this one was smooth and warm and seemed to glow with an inner light. "This stone contains the memory of everything you learned here," Vera said. "Keep it by your bed. Hold it when the worry comes, and remember, you are safe, you are worthy, and your body knows how to rest." Eleanor held the stone to her heart. Eleanor opened her eyes in her own bedroom. For a moment, she was disoriented. The sanctuary felt so real, so vivid, that her familiar room seemed like the dream. But then she felt the stone in her hand, warm and smooth, and she knew it had been real, or real in a way that mattered more than the ordinary categories of real and unreal. The clock showed that only 30 minutes had passed since she lay down. 30 minutes. And yet it felt as though she had lived an entire journey, learned essential truths, been taught by ancient wisdom keepers, and returned transformed. But Eleanor didn't feel transformed in the way she thought she would. She didn't feel suddenly happy or suddenly free from all worry. Instead, she felt something more subtle and more profound. She felt present. She felt willing to be in her body. She felt, for the first time in years, that sleep was possible. She lay back down on her own bed and she tried the breathing pattern that Iris had taught her. 4 counts in, 4 counts holding, 6 counts out. As she did this, she could feel her body responding, could feel the relaxation that came from connecting with her breath, from remembering that she was alive and supported and held by the invisible forces that sustained all life. The worry came, as it always did, the old familiar worry about not sleeping enough, about all the things she hadn't done, about whether tomorrow she would have the energy to continue. But this time, she watched it. She let it be a cloud. She didn't fight it. She didn't push it away. She just observed it. And as she observed it, she felt it begin to drift and shift and transform. Eleanor brought the stone up to her lips and kissed it, a gesture of gratitude to Vera and to Thomas and to Iris and to grandmother and to her own future self. And then she held it to her heart and continued breathing, breathing, breathing. Outside her window, the night was dark and vast and full of stars, and Eleanor found that she was no longer afraid of it. The night was not her enemy. The night was the place where her body could finally be still. The night was the container that held all the peace she had been seeking. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes, and Eleanor became less aware of the distinction. She was in that liminal space between waking and sleeping, and it was no longer frightening. Instead of being a place of struggle, it had become a place of peace. She existed in the space between her thoughts, in the gaps between her breaths, and in those gaps there was rest. Sleep, when it finally came, didn't arrive like a sudden descent. It arrived like a deepening, a gentle settling, a slow sinking into softness. It was like watching the sun set in slow motion, watching the light gradually transform into darkness, watching the world gradually let go of its brightness and accept the gentle darkness of night. Eleanor slept. After months of lying awake, of fighting against the night, of trying to force sleep to come, she finally let go and allowed sleep to come to her. It was the easiest thing she had ever done, because she was finally not doing anything. She was just being, just resting, just allowing her body to do what it had always known how to do. And in her sleep, Eleanor dreamed. She dreamed of the sanctuary, but the sanctuary was not a separate place anymore. It was woven into the fabric of her own being. She dreamed of Vera and Thomas and Iris and grandmother, and they were not outside herself anymore. They were teachers who had always been inside her, waiting for her to finally listen. She dreamed of gardens that breathed with her, of libraries that contained all the peace in the world, of beds made of clouds and comfort. She dreamed the kind of deep, restorative dreams that healing sleep brings, the kind of dreams that our bodies create to process emotions and restore balance and remind us who we really are underneath all the worry and rushing and trying. The night held her gently, and as it held her, her body was doing the miraculous work of rest. Every cell was being renewed, every emotion was being processed, every part of her being was being restored to wholeness. The stone lay on her nightstand, still warm, still glowing with inner light, and Eleanor slept on, deeper and deeper, into the peace that her body had always known was waiting for her. When Eleanor woke in the morning, something had shifted. It was not the dramatic shift of suddenly being cured, suddenly being a completely different person, but it was real. It was palpable. She could feel it in the way her body met the mattress, in the ease of her breathing, in the softness of her thoughts. She had slept. For the first time in months, she had slept through most of the night. There had been moments of waking, but they had not terrified her. She had used the breathing pattern, had held the stone, had remembered what she had learned, and the sleep had returned. Eleanor lay in her bed as the morning light began to filter through her window, and she felt something close to joy, or rather, something underneath joy, a profound gratitude, a deep knowing that something had changed, not just in her her circumstances, but in something fundamental about how she was moving through the world. She understood now that the sanctuary had given her more than just techniques for sleeping better. It had given her a philosophy of rest, a permission to stop trying so hard, a remembering that her worth was not dependent on her productivity, that she was allowed to be, to rest, to surrender to her own deep needs. The day ahead of her still contained the same obligations it always did. There were still bills to pay, relationships to maintain, work to do. But all of this now existed in a different context. She no longer believed that she had to earn her right to rest. She no longer believed that rest was something to feel guilty about. She now understood in her bones that rest was not indulgent. It was essential. It was the foundation that everything else rested upon. Eleanor reached for her phone and did something she had rarely allowed herself to do. She called in and asked for a personal day, not because she was sick, though her body was certainly healing. She called because she wanted a day to be gentle with herself, to move slowly, to remember the peace of the sanctuary, to practice what she had learned. As she sat with her morning tea, looking out at the day ahead of her, Eleanor held the stone and whispered her gratitude to Vera, to Thomas, to Iris, to grandmother, and in the quiet of her own heart, she heard their voices in return. "You're welcome," they seemed to say, "and we'll be here whenever you need us. Rest well." Eleanor set the stone on her nightstand, and she smiled. Tonight she would sleep again, and the night would no longer